let's bring it in terms of a fraternal debate and discussion, because there are developments happening both, and they usually do happen both in the economic and political. We are seeing developments south of the border where we are seeing the beginnings of left unity. There's still a long way to go. There are still a lot, and still a lot remains to be done down here. But we've got to look at the mass movement, we've got to look at the conditions under which that mass movement will come about. And we've got to be realistic and honest with ourselves and look at how the trade union movement today is structured. How fit for purpose is it, and what improvements have to be made, and if they are radical improvements, in light of what I would argue are the fundamental ground-changing rules that the economy has changed, our relationship with the means of production and distribution and exchange have changed as a result of that. And the two trains that are coming down the tracks parallel, neoliberalism, which is still there, and the changing of globalisation. That we have got to change in the light of that, and we've got to make the adjustments that are necessary. And I think it's time, way beyond time, that we started to launch this discussion, debate, to bring about that and to unleash that mass movement. It won't change otherwise, and I certainly agree with the previous speakers that that is the essence of change that we have to get. Otherwise we remain confined to a manageable periphery. Change can be made and change will be made, but I think we've got to analyse where we are rather than, as I say, analytical rather than critical is where we should be at the moment. So I think, Paul, I'll wind up on that. Thanks.
Thank you. Three very clear messages there about the role of the unemployed and unemployed unions. So now maybe I'll open it up to the floor for some questions. Tommy?
I'd just like to ask Tommy a question, a little bit of clarification. Say about Dublin Critical, who ran a little. I have a lot of years' experience as a shop steward in the union. One of the biggest problems I find is how to get people's narrow self-interest away from the narrow self-interest and into the wider economic and political questions. I work in a plant which was filed with SK within the area. We should have been in a situation where we could have known the benefit of the trade union movement, been able to go outside and help. I found the self-interest really, really hard to overcome. So at times I think, for themselves, I think we've got to be critical of ourselves, our trade unions, and not see working class people making sense who are not. Some of them are more capitalist minded than the biggest employers we have. And I think we've got to be critical of ourselves as well. You know, especially in trade unions. The majority of trade union organisations, I say 20%, are very narrow focused. No interest. Even within the plants you do yourself, they find within the departments are very narrow focused. It's how do you change that? It's not a moral question, not a critical question. How do you change people's view? And I don't know, maybe that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I take your point, and I certainly agree with you that you just can't be sentimental about members of the trade union movement or members of the working class, because we're all human beings, and you know, people are as liable to make mistakes one as the next. That's, I think, taken for granted. But I think, on the other hand, we can't surrender at any stage to pessimism or despair. And the lesson of history is that at times when there's a situation and there's a crisis, that either we respond to it or we collapse in front of it. The example that, and Eamon McCann is more than well fit to speak for himself, but the example of the civil rights movement, I would suggest that in the middle 60s, here in Northern Ireland, there was as much despair and despondency as you could put in 40 buckets. It took something to break through, and then once the breakthrough comes, it's amazing how people, because we're conditioned to cooperate. That's what makes humans different from animals, and it's the one thing that you see where we are contesting the ground with Thatcherism. There is such a thing as a community, there is such a thing as a society. We are not just a collection of individuals, and that's what allows us, this sort of social conflict that allows humanity to move forward. And the real problem, in my opinion, is to start to see the examples, to create the examples, to give people that courage and confidence to come out and tackle it. Because there is this very, very deep undercurrent and you can tap into it anywhere of despondency, anger, despair, depending on where you go. Anger at those that have mistreated us, that have robbed us, that have ripped the system off and are still quite comfortably off, thank you very much. That anger's there, and the thing is, how do we find the vehicle? And this is one of the things that, I mean, let's put it this way, I don't want to be too bland, but we could run out 3 or 4 or 5, 6 points here that basically anybody in the room would agree with. Full employment, a decent wage, care for the elderly, care for the young, education and health. Nobody disagrees. The thing is, how do we do it, and how do we get the vehicle to do it? This is one of the things that I think we've got to look at, the vehicle to do it. And at that stage, once that vehicle emerges, it's remarkable then how fast the momentum will build up. And I think that's, I don't want to say an awful lot more than that.
No, but the only point I'm going to promise this is, as I say, I think it's been a moral question, and I think we've got a chance to do that. Frustrating for if you've got, used to say there were slag shelf stewards for being political, and I think the problem is it's a non-political shelf steward's the problem. How do you get people within the trade union to think of the bigger places and think on the big issue? I mean, it's not something whether people are angry about, but in fact, the biggest problem is that people's self-interest, pure self-interest. And I think we don't challenge that.
Society promotes it, like through the Celtic Tiger and Thatcherism, was all about divide and conquer. People on their own. Do you like?
Yeah, my name's Rachel Warden, and I'm Jerry, and I'm good for coffee as well. And I think you're right about the self-interest thing, and like what you were saying, from the minute that a child enters school, they've been encouraged to put themselves in competition with other children and through selection and all that kind of stuff. But if you look at what's been happening in Egypt over this last while, now I tell you, that is a place where self-interest would say, stay at home, keep your head down, don't do anything, because if you go on the street, you're dead. It's not just that you're blacklisted, you're dead. And yet, when people saw that there was a change that was possible, and when they saw that there were people, taking to the streets and there was that crack there, they were in their millions, I mean, literally in their millions. And I think that's actually when Tommy's talking about how do we find the vehicle. See, I don't think we find the vehicle and then the millions come to the vehicle. I think that what we need is self-organisation of working class people from below, and then they'll build the vehicle, if you know what I mean. And I do think that's a really important point, because everything that Tommy was saying about, the impact of neoliberal globalisation on working class people, that was all said as well in the early 1970s when the long post-war boom ended. And that was sort of before globalisation really started. It was sort of, I suppose, the start of it really. And the response of the working class in Ireland and these islands generally was a rank and file movement. And that rank and file movement was still there when I became politically active in the late 1970s. And there was actually, factories in Dublin where unemployed people were able to go, unemployed people who were organising themselves were able to go and get solidarity from in factories that were able to stop working, because the workers were in charge of those factories really. The factories were able to stop working when the unemployed people came in to talk to them, or when H-Block campaigners came in to talk to them, or when women's rights campaigners came in to talk to them. They'd be able to stop the entire factory because it was the rank and file who ran the factory. Now, of course, there was an elite, there was the trade union bureaucracy who did their best to try to close that down, and eventually they did, along with the politicians, along with the powers that be. But the thing is that grew up, as a response from below, and I suppose that's really my plea, is to say, let's not waste our time trying to figure out from up here, how we're going to change things, but rather try to, agitate from below, and by doing that, like I say, people will make their own vehicle. That's my tuppence worth.
Formula strategies go along.
So, make it organic, I think that's it.
Fluid.
Yeah, I mean, there was a meeting organised not so long ago in relation to the Trades Council, and there must be about 50 people or so at it. And there's people walking past in the street. You were wondering why more people weren't interested in what was actually happening. It sort of taps into this idea about what message are people getting. Why is it that people would sit in the house, whether they're employed, whether they're unemployed, because it's about the organisation of people not organisation of categories of people, right? And wondering why it is that they sit there, and whether it's self-interest or whether it's the fact that they're more interested in X Factor on a Saturday, all right? Because again, bombarded by propaganda to keep them down, to keep everybody fearful, to keep, if you put your head above the parapet, it's going to get shot off. You're going to be, keep quiet and you'll be safe enough somehow, And in fact, that's what we've been fed, and I believe people really in their hearts believe that. So part for me anyway is about that message changing. It's about saying, next April, or this coming April, when things from a health perspective get slaughtered, what's it going to mean if you go to the GP with a lump in your breast, for example, and it means that you could wait 6 months rather than 3 months to get it seen? Right? Now, these are the kind of things that make people sit up and listen. Say, Jesus, I don't want that to happen to me. It's the reality of what could and will be happening, because the services are going to be slaughtered. And we're in this belief that somehow it has to be slaughtered in order to survive. And it's back to this idea again. It's almost like socially engineered in a sense. They would keep the people fearful, and they'll sort of conform to whatever you tell them. And I was sort of just saying earlier there about the people in France when they went to put the pension age up by 2 years, millions came onto the street, right? They're telling us now that everything's going to be cut and slaughtered, and nations, oh sweet Jesus. I think I'll sit in front of the fire.
This man's right, because how do we energise people to get them on the street? Because I think about the protest, not a protest in Strabane, I think maybe a month ago, there were a few of us at it, I mean, are the working class people, are they that battered with all the cuts down the years, they're just getting fed up with it? Because I don't know how they can get them energised. People don't seem, the interest that doesn't seem to be there, but are they going to realise in April when the cuts do come again that they have to come too late, then the horse is bolted,
I think it goes back to what Tommy was saying. Tommy made the point that if protests are going to come, it's going to have to come from the community. If the trade union puts out a dozen press releases to say we're going to have a march, we're going to have a demonstration, people think, oh,
no one's going to come to these protests.
Yes, because the same region fact is just worried about the terms and conditions of employment. The key in my view is that we have to engage with the community sector, the public, the service users, and have the organisations that are looked after by the public sector also putting out the press releases, also attending the meeting, and also making the speeches. We've done that in the past, and it's proven very successful. But if it's just a trade union movement alone organising the meeting instead, just go back to Tommy's point.
Just, I'll take Alton first, but just to go back to Skill's point,
Is it not a case, taking what Tommy was saying earlier on, even from the period of Thatcherism in the 80s, is it not a case that the actual organisations, like the trade union organisations, like all the political parties across the two islands here, have actually told us one thing? There's no political party sitting today in North, South or in England that says we're right wing, but all the political parties are on one agenda towards cuts. No matter what they tell you privately in the media, they're all going to be cut. In the Free State at the minute, we're sitting with Fianna Fáil, Fianna Gael. It's not going to make much difference who gets voted on. They're still going to be cut. The trade union movement itself is all part of that. I mean, the trade union is affiliated to the Labour Party in England, which is affiliated to Tony Blair, which is affiliated to the whole coalition war with America. It's like I'm a bit of a member of the trade union all my life, but I still feel my dues are going, because on this side of the border, but I'm the elect Tony Blair in England. And I get back, I'm happy at Tommy's on the thing. I think for working class people, they have class consciousness. We need to get back and say to ourselves, how are we going to mobilise right across the thing and be an organisation that is going to actually deliver what we actually need on the ground, as opposed to cliches of politicians or trade union officials. There's been as many trade union officials playing golf in Dublin here with the bankers as politicians. Many trade union officials sitting in Quangos and Stormwood and London and in Dublin, high-ranking trade union officials, they have no more in touch with us than some politicians.
The trades conscience is about grassroots stuff,
No,
but if you go back to Eamon's point, it's about the misdirection.
But I'm saying is,
and what we need to do is highlight the misdirection.
All our unions here represented, all a lot of our leaders and them unions there, all work a system that doesn't work for us anymore. And I'd go back to Tommy's thing, they're making a new radical thinking by working class people, and they who we want to speak first.